My sister-in-law stole the names of all my miscarried babies and used them for her own children, then poisoned my prenatal vitamins to cause yet another miscarriage. She actually thinks I'm not going to ruin her life right now. What's the sweetest revenge you've ever tasted? For me, it was the cold, calculated dismantling of her carefully curated world. For years, I was the walking embodiment of false hope. In Maplewood, New Jersey, I was the infertile one. But I wasn't just any kind of infertile. I was the cruelest version, the woman who could conceive but never carry. I endured 3 miscarriages, each one a devastating earthquake hitting in the second trimester. Everyone in our circle was supportive, or at least they pretended to be. Everyone except my sister-in-law, Madeline. The first time I lost a child and collapsed in her lap, she stroked my hair with a chillingly rhythmic grace. She whispered that she would always be there for me. She promised that when her next baby was born, I would be the godmother. In my grief-stricken haze, I viewed her as my closest confidant, a secular saint in my Catholic world of mourning. 2 weeks later, at her lavish baby shower in Greenwich, the mask slipped. Madeline stood before her Digital Creators Guild friends and announced her daughter's name. As the word left her lips, bile rose in my throat. Maya. It was the exact name I had chosen for my unborn daughter, a name I had shared with her in confidence. "Well, it's not like you were ever going to use it," Madeline said when I confronted her in the kitchen. She let out a high-pitched squeal, sounding like a pig being lit on fire, her eyes dancing with malice. When my husband, Julian, came over to investigate, I told him everything through hot, angry tears. But Julian, a software engineer who processed emotions like a malfunctioning script, just laughed it off. I waited until the car ride back to Maplewood to explain why my heart was breaking. Julian was the love of my life, but he was passive to a fault, a byproduct of being the family scapegoat. He was the type of man who would apologize to someone for being in the way of their swing. "That's just how Madeline is, honey," he said with a heavy, weary sigh. I tried to find peace. I became a Pilates princess, obsessed with organic greens and fertility supplements. But the universe remained indifferent. A year and a half later, another baby died in my womb. A few weeks after that, I was in a pharmacy when I saw the notification. Madeline had posted a photo of her second son. The caption read, "Welcome baby Leo. Thanks to Isabella, my name, for the inspiration. Her loss is my gain." She followed the text with a pregnant emoji and a skull. By the time she stole the name Sophia from my 3rd miscarriage, I had grown numb. She would send me nursery photos with captions like, "Bet you wish this could be for your Sophia." Julian still defended her, insisting I was being too sensitive about mere names. After 4 years of this torture, I stopped hoping. Then Madeline announced she was pregnant with her 4th. At a family dinner, she made jokes about which of my dead names she should harvest next. Everyone laughed, everyone except me. That night, something inside me snapped. If she wanted another name, I would give her one she'd never forget. I waited until the next gathering and performed the role of the broken sister. I told Madeline privately that I had discovered a secret in the diary of my late mother, Adelaide. I told her about a hidden middle name Adelaide had never shared, Lexativa. I claimed it meant sacred child in an ancient, forgotten dialect. I spent nights meticulously forging diary pages and creating a Pinterest board dedicated to honoring ancestral naming. Madeline, the ultimate lifestyle influencer, took the bait. She announced to her thousands of followers that she was naming her daughter Lexativa Rose to honor our family's hidden history. I felt a dark spark of satisfaction, which lasted until 8 months later when the universe threw me a curveball. I was pregnant, and I had made it to the 3rd trimester. Julian and I kept it a secret, terrified of another memorial. But then came the text. Madeline was inviting us to her massive baby shower at her Greenwich estate. I wore a flowy, oversized dress that concealed my 29-week bump. Julian, who had finally stopped giving a damn about his sister's feelings, gripped my hand tightly as we walked in. The room was packed with her mommy blog followers, all eager to hear the story of baby Lexativa. Madeline stood in the center of the room, preening as she began her speech about the sacred name. I chose that moment to stand up. "Actually, Madeline, I have something to share too," I said, smoothing the fabric over my unmistakable stomach. The room went dead silent. Madeline's mouth hung open. My mother-in-law, Beatrice, dropped her champagne glass, the crystal shattering against the hardwood. 29 weeks today, I announced, cradling my belly. We wanted to be sure this time. The room erupted. Guests swarmed me while Madeline's face drained of color. That was when Julian, the quiet saint of the family, stood up. "Madeline, you were saying something about Lexativa, about all that research you did." Madeline's face shifted from white to a deep, embarrassed red. "Yes, it means sacred child in ancient, they so—" Julian interrupted, pulling out his phone with the clinical precision of a software engineer. "That's so weird, because when I Google Lexativa, the only results I get are medical websites for chronic constipation relief." I had to pinch my nose from keeping from howling. The silence that followed was heavy and delicious. I grabbed Julian's hand and we walked out of that estate with our heads held high. But the triumph was short-lived. At 4 in the morning, a sharp, familiar pain tore through my abdomen. It was a sensation I had felt 3 times before. Julian rushed me to the hospital, but in my heart, I already knew. Another miscarriage. The doctors were baffled, but I wasn't. I soon discovered that my nighttime prenatal gummies had been swapped for something toxic to a pregnancy. I knew instantly that Madeline was behind it. The police claimed they couldn't prove anything. The bottle had vanished from our bathroom, and the hospital couldn't identify the specific substance in time. Julian finally stopped defending her. He sat on our bed, staring at an empty vitamin bottle we had found hidden in the depths of our outdoor trash can. His hands shook. Madeline had been in our house just 48 hours before the pain started, claiming she wanted to help organize the nursery. I became a woman possessed. I started documenting everything, every cruel text, every social media taunt, every veiled threat Madeline had made over the years. My laptop was my only companion as I pieced together the pattern of her sociopathy. 3 weeks after losing the baby I had intended to name Serafina Grace, I found the missing link that made my blood run cold. I discovered that Madeline's best friend, Eleanor, wasn't just a socialite, she was a pharmacy technician at the CVS Health Hub where I filled every single one of my prescriptions. The pieces of the puzzle weren't just falling into place, they were locking into a cage I was about to trap Madeline inside of forever. I spent the next month befriending a disgruntled ex-employee of Madeline's Digital Creators Guild, a girl named Chloe who had been fired for not having the right aesthetic. Chloe had access to Madeline's shared cloud drive. Together, we found the deleted messages. There it was, a conversation between Madeline and Eleanor discussing my biological failures. Madeline had explicitly asked Eleanor for something to help nature take its course, because she couldn't stand the thought of me having a baby after I embarrassed her at the shower. I didn't go to the police right away. Instead, I waited for Madeline's biggest moment, the launch of her new Mindful Motherhood brand. At the gala, in front of her investors and the local press, I didn't make a scene. I simply handed a thumb drive to the lead reporter from the local news and the head of her investment firm. It contained the texts, the pharmacy records, and a video of Madeline laughing about my constipation baby prank while admitting to the adjustment she made to my vitamins. By the time we reached the parking lot, Madeline's phone was exploding. Her brand was dead before the first apatizire was finished. Julian and I moved to a different state, leaving the wreckage of her life behind. I may never have my Serafina, but I have the peace of knowing that Madeline will never steal another name or another life again. For the first time in years, the silence in my home doesn't feel like mourning, it feels like victory. I remembered seeing them giggling together at family gatherings, their heads bowed in a way that always made my skin crawl. Madeline with her perfectly manicured Greenwich life, and Eleanor, the pharmacy technician who seemed perpetually under her spell. Eleanor was always asking intrusive questions about my fertility treatments, her eyes darting toward Madeline as if seeking approval for every prying word. It was a cruel choreography I hadn't understood until it was too late. I could still see the way the sunlight hit Madeline's highlights as she whispered in Eleanor's ear, a secret shared at my expense. I drove to the CVS Health Hub during Eleanor's afternoon shift. The clinical, sterile scent of floor wax and rubbing alcohol hit me as I walked past the displays of seasonal cards and discounted candy. Eleanor saw me coming. Her eyes went wide behind her spectacles, and she immediately tried to duck into the back room. I moved faster, cornering her near the end of the vitamin aisle, beneath the flickering lights. Her face went white when I mentioned the prenatal supplements Madeline had gifted me. "I don't know what you're talking about, Isabella," she stammered, her voice thin and brittle. Her hands trembled so violently that she knocked a bottle of vitamin C off the shelf while trying to straighten the display. That evening, the digital world turned against me. Madeline posted a soulful entry on her Mindful Motherhood blog about toxic family members who weaponize their own grief to make false accusations. Within hours, her followers, members of the Digital Creators Guild and stay-at-home moms from across the country, were flooding my social media with vitriol. My phone buzzed non-stop, a relentless vibration against the nightstand. The notifications called me jealous, delusional, and attention-seeking. One commenter even suggested my Catholic faith was a front for a disturbed psyche. As a freelance editor, I instinctively found myself correcting the grammar of their death threats, a hollow defense mechanism against the overwhelming cruelty. Julian finally deleted his social media accounts after Madeline's followers started attacking his professional profile. He was a software engineer, and they were tagging the tech firms and the Mercy Hospital network where he consulted on their data systems. We sat in our Maplewood living room with the curtains drawn tight against the world, feeling like we were under a digital siege. He kept apologizing for not believing me sooner, his voice thick with a guilt that mirrored my own exhaustion. For years, he let Madeline's narcissistic behavior slide, dismissing it as the eccentricity of a high-achieving lifestyle influencer. Now, the weight of his sister's malice was crushing us both, and the Christian grace he tried to live by was being tested to its limit. The next family dinner was at Madeline's sprawling estate in Greenwich. We almost didn't go, but Beatrice, my mother-in-law, called Julian crying from her Boca Raton penthouse, begging us not to let a silly misunderstanding tear the family apart. Against my better judgment, we went. Madeline had strategically placed the bassinet for her new baby, whom she'd named Seraphina Grace, the very name I had picked for the daughter I lost, right in the center of the dining room. Every time I looked up from my plate, I saw that name embroidered in gold on the silk blanket. The room smelled of expensive lavender and hypocrisy, a nauseating mix of floral lies. Madeline kept making pointed comments about how some people simply couldn't handle the glow of another person's happiness. During dinner, Madeline excused herself to feed the baby. Her laptop sat open on the Carrara marble kitchen counter, its screen still glowing in the dim light of the designer pendants. I don't know what possessed me, but I found myself walking toward it while pretending to get a glass of filtered water. The browser was open to her private email. My heart pounded against my ribs like a trapped bird as I saw subject lines discussing fertility herbs and natural miscarriage remedies. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone, taking photo after photo of the screen, the blue light reflecting in my eyes. "What are you doing?" Madeline's voice cut through the air like a serrated knife. I spun around, my phone clutched to my chest. She didn't look like a motherhood guru then. She looked feral. She lunged for me, her nails digging into my wrist with a strength that shocked me. We struggled in her pristine kitchen, the sound of our scuffling feet echoing off the high ceilings. "Give it to me, you crazy bitch," she hissed, her breath hot against my cheek. I held tight, pivoting my body to protect the phone. I wouldn't let go. Julian heard the commotion and rushed in, followed by a confused Beatrice. For the first time in his life, my husband saw his sister's mask completely shatter. Her face was twisted with a raw, ugly rage. "She's trying to steal my phone. She's gone crazy, just like I told you all." Madeline switched tactics, tears appearing with terrifying practiced speed. But Julian had already seen the deep red scratches on my wrist and the wild, manic look in his sister's eyes. He stepped between us, physically shielding me. For once, he didn't take her side. "We're leaving," he said quietly, his voice as hard as flint, ignoring her sobbing pleas. Madeline's tears dried instantly as we walked toward the door. "Fine, run away like you always do, but everyone's gonna know the truth about her," she screamed. We drove back to New Jersey in a heavy silence, my wrist throbbing in time with my pulse. When we got home, I showed Julian the photos. His face grew paler with each image of the herbal concoctions she'd researched. The next morning brought fresh hell. Madeline's blog featured a post about dealing with mentally unstable family members. She claimed I'd attacked her in her home and that I'd been faking my pregnancies for attention. She even posted a photo of a small bruise I hadn't caused. Her followers ate it up, starting a #JusticeForMadeline hashtag. Beatrice called within hours, her voice sharp with judgment. "You need to apologize, Isabella," she said, not even asking for my side of the story. "Madeline is considering a restraining order." "She poisoned my baby, Beatrice," I shouted, the grief finally boiling over. "Don't be ridiculous," she snapped. "Madeline would never do something like that. You're clearly having some kind of breakdown. Maybe you should get help." The nightmare hit rock bottom when Clara, a case manager from Child Protective Services, arrived at our suburban home in Maplewood. Madeline had reported us, claiming I was mentally unstable. Clara explained that over 50 complaints had been filed by concerned citizens from Madeline's online following, each one echoing the same coordinated lies. Our adoption application was put on hold, and I spent that night sobbing in Julian's arms. The next morning, Eleanor called. Her voice was a ghostly whisper. "Meet me at Oakwood Memorial Park. Come alone." I found her sitting on a weathered bench near the playground, nervously watching mothers push their children on the swings. "I can't do this anymore," she said as soon as I sat down, her eyes red-rimmed. A small gold cross hung from her neck, a stark contrast to what she was about to admit. "Madeline made me switch the vitamins. She said it was just harmless herbs to help with your anxiety. She had dirt on me. I've been skimming pills from the pharmacy, just anxiety meds for my own nerves, but she knew. She's a monster, and I can't do it anymore." Eleanor's fingers trembled so violently that the small gold cross around her neck danced against her collarbone. "She found out about the pills, Isabella. I don't know how, but she threatened to report me to the board unless I helped her ruin you." I reached into my bag, my heart hammering as I fumbled for my phone to record the confession, but Eleanor's hand shot out, her grip clamping around my wrist with surprising strength. "No recordings," she hissed, her eyes darting toward the mothers pushing strollers near the Oakwood Memorial Park playground. "I'll deny every word. I'm only telling you because I'm a Christian woman and my conscience is screaming. I wanted to warn you. Madeline isn't finished. She's just getting started." "What do you mean she isn't finished?" The autumn air, once crisp, suddenly felt like a shroud. Eleanor glanced over her shoulder, her voice dropping to a ghostly whisper. "She's been stealing your mail. She has copies of your adoption paperwork. She knows which agency you're using. She knows Clara's name. She knows everything. Your entire life is sitting in a folder on her desk." My blood ran cold. Julian and I had spent a month wondering why our bank statements and utility bills had never arrived at our home in Maplewood. We had blamed the postal service, never imagining our neighbor was stalking our mailbox like a predator. "You have to tell someone, Eleanor," I pleaded, grabbing her sleeve. "The police, the agency, this is stalking. It's fraud." She yanked her arm away, her face contorted with pity and self-preservation. "I can't lose my job. I have children to feed, too. I'm sorry, Isabella." She hurried away, her figure disappearing behind a row of ancient oaks, leaving me shivering on the weathered bench. That evening, Julian's expertise as a software engineer became our primary line of defense. He installed high-definition security cameras around our perimeter while I changed every lock. We immediately arranged to have our mail forwarded to a secure post office box. It felt like we were fortifying a bunker, preparing for a war we never asked to fight. Madeline's next move was calculated for maximum emotional carnage. It happened during Thanksgiving dinner at my mother-in-law's house. Beatrice had tried her best to keep the atmosphere festive, but the tension was thick. Madeline arrived an hour late, making a theatrical entrance with Sophia, Maya, and Leo in tow, while baby Seraphina Grace was nestled in a designer carrier. The children were dressed in matching perfect velvet outfits. Throughout the meal, Madeline was relentless. Between bites of turkey, she made pointed, venomous comments about the tragedy of people who can't let go of the past and the importance of intensive mental health treatment for the unstable. Each jab was a needle under my skin. Julian's hand gripped mine under the table, his knuckles white, but he remained silent for Beatrice's sake. Then, as we were clearing the dessert plates, Madeline stood up and clinked her crystal wineglass. The room fell into an uneasy silence. Her hand moved to her stomach in that familiar, performative gesture I had seen on her lifestyle blog. "Julian and I have an announcement," she said, though her husband looked just as surprised as the rest of us. "We're expecting again, and I've already chosen the perfect name." Beatrice gasped, her face lighting up. "Oh, Madeline, another one? How wonderful!" "Yes," Madeline continued, her eyes locking onto mine with a predatory gleam. "If it's a girl, we're naming her Adelaide, after Isabella's dear, departed mother. It's such a tribute, don't you think?" The room began to spin. My mother, Adelaide, had been a devoted teacher before she passed away just 6 months ago. Her name was the last sacred thing I had left. I stood up so quickly my chair toppled backward, the crash echoing like a gunshot. "You wouldn't dare," I whispered, my voice thick with grief and pure rage. Madeline's smile was pure venom. "Why not? It's a beautiful name, and clearly someone should use it, since you'll never have the chance." Julian was on his feet now, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. "That's enough, Madeline. You've crossed every line. We're done." "Have I?" Madeline's voice rose to a practiced shriek. "She's the one obsessed with me. She's the one spreading lies. I'm just trying to honor family traditions." Before I could breathe, Madeline grabbed her phone and began live streaming to her followers. "You can see the hostility I'm dealing with," she sobbed into the camera, her tears appearing on cue. "I'm being attacked in my own family home." The room erupted into chaos. Beatrice began crying, pleading for peace, while Julian's father shouted about decorum. Julian grabbed my hand, pulling me toward the hallway. "We're leaving, now." As we reached the door, Madeline's voice cut through the air, sharp and mocking. "Oh, Isabella, you might want to check in with Clara. I heard the adoption agency received some very interesting documentation regarding your psychiatric history." We drove home in a heavy silence. When we walked through the door, the light on our answering machine was blinking. It was a message from Clara, our caseworker, her voice sounding uncuriously neutral as she asked us to call her urgently. My hands shook as I dialed. Clara explained they had received official documentation suggesting I'd been hospitalized for severe psychiatric breaks on multiple occasions. "That's a lie," I said, my voice breaking. "I've never been hospitalized for anything except for my miscarriages and my stillborn. You have my records." "I understand your frustration," Clara said cautiously, "but these are electronic records from the Mercy Hospital network. We're required to investigate. We'll need a full, audited release of your medical history." After I hung up, I collapsed onto the bedroom floor, sobbing until my ribs ached. Julian held me, whispering that we would fight, but the weight of Madeline's malice felt insurmountable. The following morning, we went directly to the St. Jude Medical Complex to request my physical files. The administrator pulled up my digital chart, her brow furrowing as she scrolled. "This is strange. There are several entries here I don't recognize." My heart sank as she turned the screen toward us. Someone had gained access to the system and inserted fake psychiatric admissions, complete with fabricated diagnoses of delusional disorder and pathological lying. "This is sophisticated fraud," the administrator murmured. "We'll need to launch a forensic audit to see how our firewall was breached."
It took 2 grueling weeks to have the entries flagged as fraudulent. During that window, Madeline escalated her campaign into a total scorched earth policy. She created dozens of parody social media accounts in my name, posting rants about wanting to steal her children. She even sent anonymous tips to my freelance editing clients, questioning my stability. I was effectively suspended from my work, my reputation in tatters. But the breakthrough finally came from an unexpected source. Sophia, Madeline's eldest daughter, called our house one evening while her parents were out. "Aunt Isabella," her small 9-year-old voice whispered, "I need to tell you something. Mommy makes us lie about you. She makes us practice saying you're mean and that you scare us until we say it exactly right. I don't want to do it anymore." Julian recorded the entire call, our hands trembling as we listened to the systematic coaching of a child. It was a silver bullet, but Madeline must have suspected something because the next day she posted a video claiming I was grooming her children. Protesters from her concerned citizen following even showed up at my old office with signs. 2 weeks later, Julian's grandmother celebrated her 90th birthday. We debated staying home, but the elderly woman had always been my greatest ally. The party was held at a local restaurant, neutral ground, we hoped. Madeline arrived late, radiating a smug, untouchable energy. She air-kissed relatives and gushed about her pregnancy, her belly now a prominent tool in her narrative. As she stood by the cake, preening for photos, the walls felt like they were closing in. I excused myself to use the restroom, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my chest.
Madeline followed me into the sterile, floral-scented restroom of the upscale restaurant. She moved with a calculated, rhythmic grace, the heavy click of her designer heels echoing against polished marble. She checked the stalls with predatory precision, ensuring we were truly alone before turning toward the expansive mirror. "You should just give up, Isabella," she said, her voice dripping with a terrifyingly melodic nonchalance as she touched up her lipstick, a shade of deep crimson that looked like drying blood. "You're never going to be a mother. The adoption agency has already rejected your application. Oh, didn't you know? I have a very loyal friend who works there." I remained frozen, my back pressed against the cold porcelain of the sink, my mind racing as I remembered the hidden digital camera Julian had clipped to the lapel of my cardigan. I stayed silent, letting her arrogance feed her tongue, hoping every word was being etched into digital memory. Mistaking my stillness for broken surrender, Madeline continued, her reflection smiling with a jagged sort of triumph. "It was so remarkably easy, really. Eleanor at the CVS Health Hub, my contact at the Mercy Hospital Network who helped me curate your medical records to look unfavorable, and Clara, that lovely social worker who owed me a favor. You never stood a chance against my resources, Isabella. You were playing a game where I owned the board." "Why?" I finally managed to whisper, the word catching painfully in my throat. "What did I ever do to deserve this, Madeline? We were family." She turned fully then, her eyes cold as flint, stripping away the influencer persona. "You married him. You took Julian away from me. He was my brother, my protector. He was supposed to always put me first. And then you came along with your tragic fertility story, and suddenly his entire world revolved around your grief instead of my success. You shifted the gravity of this family, and I could not allow that." "So, you killed my babies?" The grief threatened to drown me right there on the tile. Madeline actually laughed, a bright, melodic sound that chilled my marrow. "I didn't unalive anything, Isabella. You did that all on your own. I just helped nature along with that last one. Consider it a mercy from me. You're clearly not meant to carry life, and I was tired of hearing about your constant failures." I fled the bathroom without another word, my heart a frantic bird beating against my ribs. I thought we finally had her trapped, but when Julian checked the footage in the dark sanctuary of our car that night, the screen remained stubbornly black. The battery had died, a freak technical glitch at the exact moment she'd entered the room. We had nothing but my word against her millions of devoted followers. The next morning, however, a different kind of hope arrived.
Madeline's husband, a man who usually existed only as a silent background prop in her carefully staged Instagram stories, called Julian, his voice trembling with a weight he could no longer carry. They met at Oakwood Memorial Park. He looked like a ghost of a man, exhausted and hollowed out by the truth. "I found her journal," he said, sliding a heavy, distressed leather notebook across the scarred wooden table. "I wasn't snooping. It fell out of her designer diaper bag while she was filming a reel. Julian, I think you need to see what she's been writing." The journal was a descent into a private hell. Page after page detailed her systematic plans to dismantle my sanity. She wrote with sickening glee about each miscarriage, detailing her coordination with Eleanor to switch my prenatal vitamins for something toxic. But the horror went deeper. There were entries about a mother-in-law's cat she'd poisoned because of a perceived slight, a cousin's wedding she'd sabotaged by seducing the groom, and a college roommate she'd framed for drug possession to clear her own path. "I don't know who I married," he confessed, his voice cracking. "The kids, Maya, Leo, Sophia, they aren't safe in that house. I'm filing for divorce, and I'll testify. I can't be part of this darkness anymore." We spent hours photocopying every page at a local print shop before returning the original. We thought we were ready to strike, but Madeline was faster. At 6 o'clock the following morning, the silence of our suburban Maplewood street was shattered by the strobe of police lights, a warrant for dealing controlled substances. Julian and I stood in our living room, helpless and humiliated, as officers upended our lives, tearing through our bookshelves and dresser drawers. They found nothing, of course, but as the neighbors watched from behind their curtains, the social damage was done. After the police finally left, I found a small handwritten note tucked under our doormat. "Stop now or next time they'll find something." That was the breaking point. We called a mandatory family meeting at Beatrice's penthouse, claiming we had important news to share. Madeline arrived smug, likely assuming we were there to announce our total surrender. Instead, Julian silently connected his laptop to the massive television in the living room. The room went cold as the evidence began to scroll. The scanned journal entries, the time-stamped messages between Madeline and Eleanor, and the video Julian had recorded of Maya being coached to lie. The silence in the penthouse was absolute, broken only by the hum of the air conditioning. When the entry about poisoning the cat appeared, Beatrice gasped, her hand flying to her mouth in horror. "Whiskers didn't just die of old age," she whispered, her eyes filling with tears. Madeline lunged to her feet, her face contorting into a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. "This is a fabrication, a desperate frame job because they're jealous of my life, my children, my perfect brand." But her husband stood up beside her, his voice firm for the first time. "It's true, Madeline. I've seen the physical journal. You're sick. You need help." The floodgates opened. Other cousins and aunts began to speak up, sharing stories of accidents and misunderstandings that now looked like calculated cruelty. Madeline's mask didn't just slip, it shattered into 1,000 jagged pieces. She screamed, a raw, guttural sound, calling everyone traitors. She grabbed a crystal vase from Beatrice's side table and hurled it at the wall, showering the room in glass. "You want to destroy me," she shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at me. "You barren witch, you'll never have the life I have. I am the center of this family." Maya started sobbing near the doorway. "Mom, stop, you're scaring us." Madeline was beyond hearing. She lunged at me, her manicured nails reaching for my face. Julian and her husband had to physically restrain her as she fought like a caged animal, screaming obscenities. "I should have used something stronger than those tainted vitamins. I should have made sure you could never even try again." The room fell into a deathly hush. Even Madeline seemed to realize she'd admitted the truth. Julian's father sat near a framed photograph of Adelaide, his late wife, his voice like ice. "Get out of my sight. Leave this house and never come back." "I'm taking my children," she spat, trying to smooth her hair. "No," her husband said, his voice ringing with a new authority. "Maya, Leo, Sophia, come here." The children ran to their father. Even baby Serafina Grace was being held by a stunned aunt. Madeline stood alone in the center of the room, the architect of a palace that had finally collapsed upon her. She left without another word, the heavy mahogany door slamming behind her with finality. Beatrice reached for my hand, her voice thick with sorrow. "I'm so sorry, Isabella. We should have seen it. All those babies. I am so sorry." The fallout was total. Eleanor, fearing a prison sentence, provided a full confession about the vitamin tampering, including the encrypted texts Madeline had sent her. Madeline's husband secured emergency custody and a restraining order. Her membership in the Digital Creators Guild was revoked, and her lifestyle brand vanished overnight when the journal excerpts leaked to the press. 3 months later, the adoption agency called to apologize. They didn't just reactivate our application, they expedited it, moved by the resilience we'd shown. Julian and I stood in a sun-drenched courthouse last Tuesday, finalizing the adoption of newborn twins. We named them James and Charlotte, finally reclaiming the future that was nearly stolen from our arms.
The names Madeline had stolen, the identities she had tried to drape over her own narrative, finally felt like they were returning to us as we signed the final adoption papers. The scratch of the pen on vellum in that mahogany-paneled room sounded like a victory. I thought about the grueling journey that had brought us here, whispering a silent prayer to my mother, Adelaide, for watching over us from above. Madeline was now facing serious criminal charges for the vitamin tampering, though her expensive lawyers were aggressively pushing for a plea deal involving mental health treatment instead of the prison time she deserved. Her children, Sophia, Leo, and Maya, were finally thriving under the care of their father, free from their mother's toxic influence. Sophia had started calling me Aunt Isabella again, her voice regaining a light I thought had been extinguished. She'd even asked if she could help babysit the twins when they were older. "I want to be a good big cousin," she'd said, her eyes reflecting a maturity no 9-year-old should possess. Not like my mom was a sister. As we drove home from the courthouse with our babies, Julian reached over and squeezed my hand, his palm warm and steady. We'd survived Madeline's campaign of terror, and somehow we'd come out stronger. The twins gurgled in their car seats, the scent of fresh baby powder and new car leather filling the cabin, and I smiled through my tears. Madeline had tried to steal everything from me, my peace, my motherhood, my sanity. But in the end, she'd only stolen from herself. I had my family, my babies, and my life back. And Madeline, she had exactly what she'd always given others. Nothing but the cold, sharpening consequences of her own cruelty. The courthouse adoption ceremony had ended at high noon. By 12:30, Madeline was already causing problems. Julian spotted her first, standing like a specter across from the courthouse steps where we were taking photos with Charlotte and James. She wore oversized sunglasses and a baseball cap pulled low, but her rigid, haughty posture gave her away. "Don't look," he whispered, shifting his body to block her predatory view of the twins. The photographer noticed our sudden tension and suggested we move quickly to the garden. As we walked away, I heard rapid, rhythmic footsteps. Madeline had crossed the street. "Those should have been my names to give," she called out, her voice cracking the afternoon air. Security intercepted her before she reached us. We watched them escort her away while she shouted about her rights as an aunt. The twins slept through it all, unaware of the drama surrounding their first official day as ours. That afternoon, we discovered Madeline had been far more busy than we thought. Our adoption announcement on social media, posted by my mother-in-law Beatrice with our permission, had been screenshotted and reposted on Madeline's new blog with vitriolic commentary about baby thieves. Eleanor, who worked at the CBS Health Hub, texted me a warning while I was folding tiny laundry. Madeline had been at the pharmacy that morning asking strange, probing questions about infant medications and allergies. Eleanor had refused to give her any information and alerted her manager at the medical complex, but the encounter left everyone uneasy. We installed a doorbell camera that evening. Julian also moved our pediatrician to the St. Jude Medical Complex across town just to be safe. The twins needed their first checkup next week, and we weren't taking any chances. Madeline's husband called the next day with disturbing news. She'd broken into his house while the kids were at school, taking photo albums and baby clothes. She'd also left a note demanding visitation. "The restraining order covers the kids too," he assured us, though he sounded frayed. "But she's getting desperate. She's been staying with different friends, telling them you've all turned against her for no reason." 3 days later, Madeline showed up at Julian's workplace. She'd waited in the parking garage, approaching him as he walked to his car.
Julian immediately started recording on his phone. "You poisoned everyone against me," she said, blocking his path. "Even my own children won't talk to me." Julian tried to step around her, but she moved with him. "Madeline, you need to leave. You're violating the restraining order." "That piece of paper means nothing. You're my brother. You're supposed to protect me." Julian said quietly, "You destroyed yourself." Madeline's face contorted into something unrecognizable. She grabbed his phone and threw it against the concrete wall. It shattered on impact, the screen splintering into 1,000 jagged diamonds across the oil-stained pavement. Then she ran to her car and sped away. The broken phone meant we lost that recording, but the parking garage cameras caught everything. Julian filed a police report and a warrant was issued for her arrest. She evaded police for a week. During that time, she created dozens of fake social media profiles, flooding our accounts and our employers' pages with heinous accusations. She claimed we'd stolen her children and planted evidence. One particular profile stood out. It used photos of Charlotte and James from the courthouse, edited to include Madeline holding them. The captions claimed they were her twins that we'd kidnapped. Several of her old followers from the Digital Creators Guild shared the posts, fueling the fire. My boss called me into his office the next morning. "I know this isn't your fault, Isabella," he said, sliding a printed screenshot across his desk, "but HR is concerned. These accusations, even though they're false, are affecting our workplace." I stared at the fabricated photo of Madeline with my babies. "What are you saying?" "Take paid leave. Let this situation resolve, then we'll reassess." I cleaned out my desk that afternoon, trying not to cry. Madeline had now cost me my employment along with everything else. That night, Sophia called again. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Aunt Isabella, Mom's here. She's outside Dad's house. She keeps texting me to let her in." Julian immediately called his brother-in-law while I stayed on the line with Sophia. We could hear Madeline pounding on the door, shouting for her children. "She says she has new vitamins for the baby," Sophia whispered, referring to Serafina Grace. "Special ones to make her smart like her." My blood ran cold at the thought of those pills. "Sophia, don't open that door. Stay away from the windows." Police arrived within minutes. We listened over the phone as they arrested Madeline. She screamed the entire time about her rights as a mother and how we'd all conspired against her. They found a bottle of unmarked pills in her purse. Madeline spent 2 nights in jail before making bail. Her lawyer argued she was having a mental health crisis and needed treatment, not incarceration. The judge agreed to bail with strict conditions. She had to wear an ankle monitor and stay away from all family members. The pills tested positive for a mild sedative, completely inappropriate for an infant. It was enough to add attempted child endangerment to her charges. Madeline's former friends began distancing themselves as more truth emerged. One of them, a woman named Clara, called me directly. "I'm sorry," Clara said. "I believed her stories, but then I caught her in my medicine cabinet at 3 a.m. going through my prescriptions. When I confronted her, she said she was just looking for aspirin." "But you don't believe her," I finished. "No, and there's more. She's been using my computer to create those fake profiles. I have screenshots of everything." Clara emailed us dozens of screenshots showing Madeline's activity, creating fake accounts, editing photos, and coordinating harassment. It was all there, time-stamped, and undeniable. We added it to the evidence. We added those final, damning screenshots to our evidence file, which had grown thick enough to fill a heavy, reinforced banker's box. Julian, ever the methodical software engineer, spent his long evenings organizing every document chronologically, preparing for the upcoming criminal trial with the same cold, analytical precision he usually reserved for debugging complex code. He looked weary under the flickering LED lights of our home office in Maplewood, the stress etching deep lines around his eyes. Meanwhile, I tried to keep our daily focus on the fragile beauty of our new life. Serafina Grace was thriving, gaining weight, and finally gifting us with those wide, gummy smiles that made the sleepless nights feel like a holy blessing. She was a tiny miracle, her Hispanic-American features reflecting my own, while she possessed Julian's bright, searching eyes. Every milestone, rolling over, grasping a wooden rattle, felt like a hard-won victory that Madeline couldn't steal from our family. The adoption agency scheduled a follow-up visit shortly after the chaos. Clara, the case manager who arrived at our door, was the same woman who had been forced to investigate Madeline's initial malicious claims of neglect. She smiled warmly as she stepped into our foyer, her eyes softening as they landed on Serafina, who was nestled in a moss-green swing. "I want to apologize again for that investigation," Clara said quietly, watching Serafina grip my index finger with surprising strength. "It's clear now that those complaints were purely malicious, designed to cause your family maximum trauma." "We understand you had to follow protocol," Julian replied, his hand resting protectively on the small of my back. "It is just difficult when the system is so easily weaponized." "Yes, it is, but I want you to know we've officially flagged Madeline's name," Clara added with a firm nod. "If she ever tries to interfere with another placement or adoption, we'll know immediately." It was a small comfort, but we took every ounce of protection we could get. Madeline's next move arrived via a process server just 3 days later. She was suing for what her lawyer termed de facto grandparent rights, claiming we were alienating her from her rightful relationship with the children. The lawsuit was legally baseless. She was only 32 and had no biological standing, but we still had to expend the emotional energy to respond. Our lawyer actually chuckled when he reviewed the filing. "She's grasping at straws. No judge in this state will grant a hearing based on this nonsense." He was right. The lawsuit was dismissed within a week. But Madeline's obsession didn't terminate with the legal defeat. She began appearing at the CVS Health Hub, Oakwood Memorial Park, and even our pediatrician's office. She always stayed exactly 51 feet away, never violating the literal letter of the restraining order, but ensuring her presence felt like a freezing shadow over our most mundane errands. One humid afternoon at the park, she sat on a weathered iron bench staring at us with a hollow, fixed gaze for 2 hours. Other parents noticed the palpable tension and moved their toddlers to the opposite side of the playground. When a concerned mother from Maya's school approached to ask if I knew the strange woman, I simply told her she was someone we had a restraining order against. Word spread through the Maplewood parent groups like a brush fire. Madeline shifted strategies, sending letters through her lawyer about reconciliation. Each page contained subtle threats wrapped in the nauseating faux spiritual language of her influencer persona. "I forgive you for turning my family against me. I'm willing to move past the lies if you'll just let me be part of the children's lives again. Don't make me prove how much I care." We gave every letter to our lawyer and the local detective, who was building a robust harassment case on top of the existing child endangerment charges. Then Eleanor, the pharmacy technician at the CVS Health Hub I'd known for years, reached out to me. "Madeline's been texting me from different numbers," Eleanor told me, her voice trembling. "She's offering me $5,000 to leak information about your prescriptions, yours, Julian's, and even the baby's." Eleanor forwarded the screenshots immediately. Madeline was offering money we knew she didn't have, as her husband had frozen their joint accounts during their bitter divorce. Those proceedings were moving rapidly. Madeline's husband had been granted full custody, and she was only allowed supervised visitation at a court-appointed facility. According to him, she'd shown up for exactly one visit, spent the entire time telling the kids, Maya, Leo, and Sophia, that everyone was part of a grand conspiracy against her, and hadn't returned. "The kids are in intensive therapy," Julian told me after a somber coffee meeting. "I keep explaining she did the right thing." We assured him we'd talk to the kids anytime they needed reassurance. 2 months after the adoption, Madeline made her most reckless mistake yet. She managed to get hired at a daycare center using her maiden name before her charges were fully indexed. A mother recognized her from the viral mommy blog drama and alerted management. They fired her immediately and reported the incident to Child Protective Services. This violation added a heavy felony charge to her list. Her lawyer finally dropped her, citing irreconcilable differences. Madeline represented herself at the next hearing. She appeared in an ill-fitting navy suit, her blonde hair unwashed, dark circles hollowing out her eyes. She rambled for 20 minutes about conspiracy theories before the judge finally slammed his gavel. "Miss Madeline, you need proper legal representation. I'm appointing you a public defender." "I don't need help," she shrieked. "I just need people to listen to the truth." "The truth according to whom?" the judge asked with a weary sigh. "According to me. I am the victim here." The judge ordered a mandatory psychiatric evaluation and scheduled another hearing. Madeline stormed out of the courtroom. In the parking lot, she confronted us near our SUV. This time, Julian and I were ready. We both had our phones recording as she marched towards us, her face contorted with rage. "Enjoy them while you can," she hissed, gesturing towards the car seats. "I know which formula you buy, which diapers you use, and exactly which path you take through the park." "Madeline, you're being recorded," Julian said steadily, "and you're violating the restraining order." "The restraining order? I've violated it a dozen times. Following you is easy when you're so predictably pathetic." Thank you for the confession, I said, hitting the stop button. Her face went deathly white as she realized her mistake. She turned to run, but court security was already approaching. They detained her until the police arrived. This time, bail was revoked. Madeline would await her trial from a jail cell. The judge cited her recorded confession and the pattern of stalking as reasons for the permanent hold. Her ex-husband brought Maya, Leo, and Sophia to visit us the following weekend. It was the first time they'd seen Serafina Grace in person since the madness began. Maya was so gentle, stroking the baby's soft cheek, while Leo was curious but careful with the bottles. "Is Mommy in jail?" little Leo asked his father, his voice small and uncertain. "Yes, buddy, she made some bad choices," his father replied gently. "Is it our fault?" Sophia asked, her 9-year-old face creased with worry. "No, sweetheart," I said, pulling her into a hug. "Nothing she did is your fault. She's sick and she needs help." The kids seemed to accept this, finding peace in the nursery. They played with toys and helped Julian feed the baby. It was a bittersweet glimpse of family life, untainted by Madeline's influence. Later that afternoon, my mother-in-law, Beatrice, arrived from Florida, her steady presence finally bringing a lasting sense of calm to our home. For the first time in months, the air in Maplewood felt light enough to breathe.
Beatrice sat on our plush sofa in the quiet of Maplewood, her hands trembling as she smoothed a yellowed page in the old photo album. My mother-in-law, a retired librarian who cherished order, had aged years in the past few months, the weight of Madeline's actions carving deep lines around her weary eyes. "I failed her somehow," she whispered, watching Maya and Leo sleep on the nursery rug. "I must have. Normal people don't do what she did." "Mental illness doesn't mean you failed as a parent, Mom," Julian told her gently, kneeling by her side. "Madeline made choices, calculated bad ones, and that is on her, not you." We spent the afternoon looking through those old photo albums, studying pictures of Madeline as a child in Puerto Rico. She was always smiling, looking so seemingly normal in the sun-drenched snapshots. Beatrice pointed out moments she now recognized as early warning signs she'd ignored. There was Madeline's explosive rage when she didn't win a primary school game, her manipulation of younger cousins, and the mysterious illness of a classmate who had dared to run against her for class president. "I always made excuses," my mother-in-law admitted, her Episcopalian stoicism finally breaking. "I said she was competitive and driven. I never wanted to see what was really there." The criminal trial was set for 6 months out. Madeline's public defender was trying to build an insanity defense, but the prosecutor at the St. Jude Medical Complex felt confident. The evidence was overwhelming, from Eleanor's detailed testimony to the handwritten journal entries Julian found to Madeline's own recorded confessions during her arrest. We settled into a new routine in New Jersey. There were park visits without looking over our shoulders and doctor appointments without the fear of medical tampering. Family dinners became sacred again, hours where Madeline's name rarely came up. The children grew bigger every day, their individual personalities emerging. Sophia was the serious one, studying everything with intense focus, while Maya and Leo were all smiles and giggles. They were perfect, and they were ours. Madeline couldn't touch them from behind the steel bars. The daycare center where Madeline had briefly worked sent us a formal letter. They were implementing new background check procedures because of what happened. They also offered us free childcare if we ever needed it, their way of apologizing for the security lapse. We declined politely. The children would stay with family or trusted friends. Trust was earned slowly these days. Eleanor sent a final text before her number was disconnected. "I'm moving. New job, new state. I need to start over where no one knows what I did. I'm sorry again. Take care of those babies." I didn't respond. Some bridges, once burned by betrayal, couldn't be rebuilt. 5 months into Madeline's incarceration, we received unexpected news. She was pregnant. Apparently, she'd been seeing someone shortly before her arrest and now faced giving birth in prison. Madeline's husband was devastated. "Those kids don't deserve another sibling born into this mess," he said, pacing our kitchen. "And who knows what she took while pregnant? She wasn't stable." The pregnancy added another layer of complexity to the trial. Her lawyer pushed harder for the insanity defense, arguing no sane woman would commit crimes while expecting. The prosecutor countered that Madeline's calculated actions showed clear premeditation, not insanity. We attended every pre-trial hearing, sitting quietly in the back, bearing silent witness.
Madeline grew larger and more disheveled with each appearance. She'd stare at us with naked hatred, her cuffed hands resting over her expanding belly. During one hearing, she exploded. "They stole my life," she screamed, pointing at us. "My babies, my family, everything, and now they sit there judging me?" The judge ordered her removed from the courtroom. As guards escorted her out, she turned back one last time. "Maya and Leo were supposed to be mine." The courtroom was silent after her outburst. Even her lawyer looked defeated. A month before the trial, Madeline went into labor. The baby, a girl, was born healthy despite our fears. Madeline named her Isabella. My hands shook when I heard. Even now, she was trying to hurt me by using my name for her child, born in custody. Child Protective Services took baby Isabella immediately. Madeline had no rights to her given her situation and the charges. The baby went to foster care while the state decided on permanent placement. Her husband considered taking her, but ultimately decided against it. "My kids have been through enough," he explained. "I can't bring home their half-sister as a constant reminder of their mother's breakdown." The trial began on a freezing February morning. Serafina Grace was 11 months old, walking and babbling her first words. We left the children with Beatrice and took our seats in the wood-paneled courtroom. Madeline entered in shackles, her postpartum body shrouded in an orange jumpsuit. She'd lost weight, her face gaunt and hollow. She found us immediately in the gallery, her stare unwavering. Eleanor testified first, detailing how Madeline had blackmailed her into switching my vitamins at the pharmacy. She broke down crying during cross-examination, but stuck to her story. The pharmacy had already revoked her license. This testimony was part of her plea deal. Madeline's husband went next, presenting the journal and describing years of manipulative behavior he'd been blind to. He shared stories of Madeline's escalating cruelty toward family, her obsession with control, and her inability to accept any slight. When it was my turn to testify, I spoke clearly and calmly about the stolen names, the poison vitamins, and the systematic destruction of my life. I showed photos of the children, healthy and thriving despite Madeline's attempts to prevent their existence. She wanted me to suffer, I said, meeting Madeline's gaze, because I had something she couldn't control, her brother's love and loyalty. Madeline's lawyer tried to paint me as vindictive, suggesting I'd orchestrated everything to steal Madeline's life, but the evidence spoke louder than his theories. The prosecution presented everything: the emails, the fake social media accounts, the doctored medical records, and the harassment campaign. They played recordings of Madeline's threats and confessions. They showed the jury the unmarked pills she'd brought to her children's house. Madeline testified on her own behalf, against her lawyer's advice. She rambled about conspiracies and betrayal, claiming I'd been planning to destroy her from the day I met Julian. She insisted the vitamins were meant to help me, that the names were coincidences, and that everyone was lying. "I'm a good mother," she insisted, tears streaming down her face. "They took my babies away because they're jealous of what I had." The prosecutor's cross-examination was brutal. He walked her through each piece of evidence, forcing her to confront her own words. Madeline's story changed with each question, contradictions piling up. Finally, he asked, "Did you or did you not tamper with the prenatal vitamins intended for Isabella?" Madeline was silent for a long moment, then whispered quietly, "She didn't deserve to be a mother." The courtroom erupted. The judge called for order while Madeline's lawyer put his hat in his hands. She'd just confessed on the stand. Closing arguments were brief. The evidence was overwhelming. The confession was damning. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. Guilty on all counts. Madeline showed no emotion as the verdict was read. Outside the courthouse, the biting winter wind whipped against us as reporters bouldered the white vultures. We pushed past them without comment. There was nothing to say. Justice had been served, but it brought no joy. I inhaled deeply, finally letting the cold air cleanse me. The fallout was a silent explosion, a family shattered into 1,000 jagged pieces. Madeline's own children were left motherless, and her youngest, a baby girl named Emma, was whisked away into the sterile uncertainty of foster care. The sentencing hearing that followed weeks later was a much quieter affair than the trial, held in a courtroom heavy with the scent of old paper and failed lives. Madeline appeared heavily medicated, her movements slow and deliberate. Character witnesses spoke on both sides, their voices echoing off the high wood-paneled ceilings, but her older children did not attend. The judge sentenced her to 15 years with the possibility of parole in 7, to be served in a facility with a mental health program, a compromise that felt like a fragile olive branch. It was more lenient than the prosecutor wanted, but harsher than her lawyer hoped. As the guards led her away, Madeline turned one last time. "Take care of my Emma," she said softly. I didn't know if she meant me or the baby. "Maybe both, maybe neither," I whispered to Julian. We drove back to our suburban home in Maplewood, New Jersey, the silence in the car filled with the weight of things unsaid. When we walked through the door, our world righted itself. Sophia, Maya, and Leo greeted us with the beautiful energy of children who hadn't yet learned how cruel the world could be. During the grueling weeks of the trial, life had continued in small, miraculous ways. Serafina Grace, our 6-month-old, had learned to babble more clearly, and Leo demonstrated his new ability to stack his wooden blocks into precarious towers. That night, after the children were finally tucked away, Julian and I sat on our back porch. He was a software engineer by trade, a man of logic, but tonight his eyes were filled with an uncharacteristic weariness. The stars over Maplewood were exceptionally bright, the air crisp with the promise of a turning season. We didn't talk about the trial or the years of pain Madeline had inflicted. We just sat together, breathing in the peace of a house that was finally, truly ours. 2 weeks later, the phone rang. It was Clara, a case manager from Child Protective Services. She spoke with the practiced neutrality of someone who dealt in human tragedy daily. Madeline's baby, Emma, needed a permanent placement. The biological family was in no position to take her, and the agency was looking for stability. "Would you and Julian consider adopting her?" she asked. I looked across the living room at my husband, then at our children playing on the rug. Maya was trying to feed Leo a toy car while he giggled, and Sophia read a book to them both. They were so happy, so innocent. "We'll think about it," I told the social worker, my heart hammering against my ribs. That night, we talked for hours. Could we raise Madeline's child? Could we look at her every day and not see her mother? Could we deny an innocent baby a loving home because of who gave birth to her? In the end, love won. It wasn't a sudden epiphany, but a slow, certain realization that Grace was not meant to be hoarded. Baby Emma joined our family 3 months later. We kept her first name, but gave her a new middle name, Hope. The transition was a whirlwind of diapers and midnight feedings, but she fit into our lives as if she had always been a missing piece. Madeline's older children visited often, and their presence brought a different kind of healing. They adored all 4 babies, especially Sophia, who took her role as the eldest cousin with a solemn, touching seriousness. Their father eventually started dating a kind woman who treated the kids with the gentle respect they deserved. Healing was slow, a marathon rather than a sprint, but it was happening. My mother-in-law, Beatrice, found peace in her role as a grandmother. Having retired from her life as a librarian in Boca Raton, she spent months with us, doting on all the children equally and making up for lost time. She never mentioned Madeline unless asked, and even then her response was brief. "She's getting the help she needs," Beatrice would say, her Episcopalian reserve intact. "That's what matters now." I returned to my work as a freelance editor when the younger children turned 2. My boss welcomed me back with a promotion, acknowledging how professionally I'd handled an impossible situation. Life settled into a beautiful, chaotic normal. Raising 4 children under the age of 10 was a constant scramble of spilled cereal and lost shoes, but it was a life built on truth. Emma grew to look nothing like her biological mother. She had a gentle nature and a smile that could light up the gloomiest New Jersey morning. The older children accepted her as their sister without question. As they grew, we told them the truth in age-appropriate ways about the complications of family, the shadows of mental illness, and choosing love over hate. We taught them that while some people who should love you simply can't, it doesn't mean you are unlovable. Eleanor, our friend from the pharmacy, often stopped by with treats, her Baptist warmth a constant comfort. Madeline wrote once, a long letter of apology and updates on her life. She was in therapy, working in the prison library, and trying to make amends for her choices. I wrote back once, wishing her well, though I knew some forgiveness takes time. Madeline's ex-husband remarried when his youngest turned 10. The wedding was a small, joyful ceremony where all 4 kids were in the wedding party, beaming with a stability they had fought hard to regain. We received occasional updates about Madeline from her lawyer. She had found religion, then lost it, then found it again. She wrote letters to her children that her ex-husband saved unopened, waiting for them to decide if they wanted to read them someday. She never wrote to us again. We were profoundly grateful for that distance. It allowed our branch of the family to grow without the choking vines of her past interference, letting us cultivate a garden of genuine, unmanipulated affection. On the twins' 5th birthday, a milestone for Maya and Leo, we threw a massive backyard party. All the cousins were there, along with school friends and neighbors from across Maplewood. Sophia, now a teenager, helped organize games with the same leadership she'd shown as a child. Madeline's other children sang happy birthday with genuine joy. Baby Emma, now 3, tried to blow out her siblings' candles. Maya stopped her gently, while Leo laughed. They were so patient with their little sister, protective and loving. Beatrice sat in her wheelchair, her eyes bright as she watched the family she had seen nearly fracture beyond repair. She held Emma on her lap, whispering stories about our family history and the legacy of my mother, Adelaide. That night, after the cake and presents, we tucked 3 exhausted children into bed. Sophia insisted on one more story, Leo wanted extra cuddles, and Emma needed her special blanket arranged just right. As I closed Emma's door, I thought about Madeline in her cell. I'd never know if she truly accepted responsibility, and that was okay. Her journey was hers alone. Julian found me in the hallway, pulling me into a hug. We had survived the impossible and built something beautiful from the ashes. The next morning brought the usual domestic chaos, but it was a chaos I cherished. Sophia helped Emma find her favorite dress, while Leo fed the dog, and the cycle of family continued, healthier now, built on truth rather than manipulation. My phone buzzed with a text from Sophia. "Can I babysit this weekend? I want to practice for when I have kids someday." I smiled, typing back a quick yes. Madeline had tried to destroy us with her jealousy. Instead, she had inadvertently created a larger, stronger family. We stood at the bus stop that fall as the older kids headed to school, 3 parents waving as the yellow bus pulled away. Later, while Emma napped, I opened a small wooden box in the closet. Inside were the ultrasound photos of the babies we had lost to Madeline's malice. I looked at them, remembering Adelaide's strength, then added a new photo of all the children playing together. Life from loss, joy from sorrow. I closed the box, ready for the messy, ordinary life that awaited me.